This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
As we are now entering into the third month of 2023, we've got clarity on the general policy guidance, which is to further stimulate the economy in China, making sure that the private sector regain momentum of growth, where industries such as consumer, AI, high technology, manufacturing, and clean energy are core focuses of the economic growth. But in reality, how is the recovery from pandemic going on, and what can we do better? Today, I have several guests from all across the industries in China to share with us their insights. So my guests today include WeRide founder and CEO Han Xu. Well, this is a star company robotaxi sector and had investments from strategic and also financial investors, including NVIDIA. They're about to close a new round of financing out of pandemic, as we heard from the street, and we're going to have more details with the CEO and founder later. Shoppo Brand Acceleration Group and founder and CEO, Guo Lu. Well, this company incubates and operates high-end consumer products, and to a certain extent, they are the indicator of consumer confidence in China. And also, I have Phil Yan Phil Yan is the managing director from Shanghai Farm. Julian Ling, deputy general manager of Cosmoplot Industry, which is a subsidiary company under Haier Group focusing on industrial internet. And also, I have Wu Chun, who is the managing director of BCG Greater China. And also our regular guest, Zhang Jianping, Director, Center for Regional Economic Cooperation from Ministry of Commerce, and they're going to provide their insights from policy and a macro perspective to us. So Tony Han, let me start from you first. You are in a cutting-edge industry, AI, the robotaxi, autonomous driving sector. So how has the financing environment been improving recently out of the pandemic? We heard from Street that you guys are about to close a new round of financing, which I understand is not very easy. Tell us more about it.
We have been working on autonomous driving for around 6 years. During these 6 years, we have seen upside and downside. We can see the capital market going up and going down. Right. It's always kind of fluctuating, but these days we are seeing an improving yet still turbulent financial environment post-COVID-19 opening up. Investors are gradually regaining their confidence in autonomous driving sector. However, they are more careful because some of the investors, they have some loss. And now they become more careful. And I believe only in the most valuable company or assets, they will want to invest. That means, like in terms of the high-tech company, you have to first demonstrate your capability, especially your technology strengths. Right. Second, you have to prove to the capital market that you are going to survive even under certain very severe circumstances. Okay, but gradually we do see like the investors have regained their confidence.
Right. So in your view, that investors' confidence are now coming back, which is very encouraging. We understand that you have robo-taxi, you have a mini robo-bus, you have robo-van, you also have robo-street sweeper, and also advanced driving solution. So currently, what is your main revenue driver?
Our main revenue driver currently, it's about from a robo minibus. We luckily last year we have achieved like a revenue of 500 million RMB, which is a significant number to L4 level autonomous driving company. But we bet more on future because we all know for the transportation of the future market, it is $1 trillion market. So the ceiling of this all autonomous driving company is kind of sky high. Therefore, we want to do first. We want to get some revenue and maybe get some profit to support ourselves. On the other hand, we still want to accumulate and make our technology be stronger and get enough talents, and so that we can build up our moat and get enough strength of technology development so that in future for that $1 trillion market, we can get a significant amount of shares.
Right. If indeed this L4 autonomous driving technology being really accepted by the street, this is definitely going to be a disruptive force. And as you mentioned, it's going to be $1 trillion market opportunity. This AI to replace human labor nowadays, frankly speaking, is a trend because we are entering into an aging society. So Phil, from your perspective, because you're in the pharmaceutical sector, what are the key challenges do you think that we are facing while we are entering into this aging society, and what are the mitigants from your perspective?
So what I'm trying to say that is I think the aging society has bring both the challenges and but more opportunity to the healthcare industries. So on the challenge side, it's very obvious. I think same as the other industries where experience the labor shortage due to aging society, for the pharmaceutical company, we depending on research, depending on manufacturing, depending on sales. There's a whole chain business. So the labor cost is going to be increasing, and we are experiencing we expect to experience some labor shortage in the industry. But on the positive side, the aging society makes people tend to live longer, and people have a higher demand for the medical and the services and the healthcare and support. And so I think we as an industry, we had to focus on certain areas, especially chronic diseases, oncologists, and all those kind of diseases, on innovations and also medical supply. And also we need to think about new ways of management and deliver an access of medications to the patients. I think one of the things we experienced during the pandemic period is the e-pharmacy. So a lot of medication is not able to be accessible through the hospitals and doctors. You had to go through the online ordering and have it delivered to your door. And I mean, many people haven't experienced that in the past, but more and more people getting familiar with that and accept that new idea. I think that's and also brings some opportunity for the healthcare industry as well.
Right. So the pandemic actually disrupted our normal life and did bring a lot of changes to the consumer behavior. So Guolu, from your perspective, what are the major changes of consumer behavior over the past 3 years in your view? You have a very interesting business model which brings the high-end brands to Chinese market. This model is not very easy to be successful, but apparently you did very well. Tell us more about it.
Well, thank you, Kate. Definitely, it's actually a phenomenal to watch how Chinese consumer evolved for the past 3 years during the pandemic. It's always been thought that China as a market, when the nation goes through pandemic, you should see the consumption drop. Actually, as a company as a whole for the past 3 years, we have been managing growing 40% a year.
Right.
That is something definitely for us, one of the area pointing out to that, understanding that even during pandemic, people's always looking for beauty and love and definitely happiness. And it's critical for brand company to no longer just focus on channels, on traffic, general marketing. It's even more and more important to understand how China is becoming much more fragmented versus before. People are buying, but their care is no longer just about discount as before.
Right.
For the past 3 years, we've seen 90s generation overtake 80s generation in high-end beauty product purchase. And we have now seen actually the post-95 generation coming up as a new driver of new brands entering into China. So I would say the consumer in general are much more content-driven. They do care a lot about the true quality of the product and also emotional fit to their own personal lives.
Right.
But that also goes a long way with when 80s and 90s generation becomes the older generation, how the entire consumer spectrum of purchasing behavior is going to change for the next 10 to 15 years. That is something definitely in our R&D pipeline is heavily focused on right now.
Right.
And I think another area of major changes you can see, because as you know, we work directly with really prominent global international brand founders, right? So, and it's actually, they have always been following China for the past 3 years. I would say, even though there are uncertainties in global environments, actually all of these brand founders actually mark China as #1 priority market, even during the really tough times. I think now is actually a better time. Actually, majority of the brands we operate, their founders are planning to coming and visit China during literally the next 4 or 5 months. So as you can see how important it is becoming. And in terms of Yushopal, we are also quite unique in that, as you know, we are not only operators, we actually are bringing our investors in acquiring, buying global assets for China,
Right.
which is very critical for the banking industry in the future, which is a significant, how would I say, a showcase of a nation's rising status in the global stage. And we actually, for the past 3 years, managed 3 major investments in competition with Global Beauty Brand Group,
Right.
and 1 major merger and acquisition of Argentine brands.
Mm.
Also, again, with all the major PE funds. As
Right.
you can see, then there is definitely, from brand founders' point of view, a appreciation of the China market, and also appreciation of Chinese investors.
Right. So basically, before you continue, let me interrupt you first. You basically have 2 parts of your business. First is the operation, and the second part is basically just to invest into the brand. Once you feel there is a certain future of the brand, so you nurture them, you also become a part of them. So the shareholder, you become a shareholder as well to help the company further grow. I understand it's a very interesting model, and I know a lot of people tried to do this many years ago on Chinese market to bring those high-end and sort of boutique brands to Chinese market, but none of them are successful. You're probably so far the only one that generates a substantial revenue and also become relatively successful. So what has been changed between now and then, like several years ago? For instance, JD was not very successful in this field. Tmall was not very successful. So what did you do right? Can you tell us very simply on this front?
I think the most important thing is we're never looking at traffic. Actually, we try to foresee where the consumer needs are.
Right.
Very relevant to the questions you asked, right? The aging generation, but we're also trying to understand the younger generation when they enter into a consumption stage. What are the differences they're looking for? So I would say number 1 major change from the market point of view, actually, is the Chinese consumer are much more mature in terms of understanding what brand is right for them.
Right.
Who they evaluate. And second is from Yushopal's view, because myself and the entire team all coming from, none of us actually coming from platforms where you look at brands behind where the brand is already hot, right? So you try to actually understand them. We actually have our own philosophy of selecting brands in terms of understanding where consumers are coming for the next 2 years.
Right.
So as a result, we're all coming from brand groups. We actually, myself coming from actually managing fashion brand groups internationally. And then that was never a conversation, as you know, about channel. It's much more about assets.
Right.
How do you brands at asset point of view? So I would say there is a new generation of entrepreneurs that's entering into the Chinese brand building arena. We are by retail value over 2 billion RMB a year. So it's retail value wise, it's significant already.
Right.
We're only a 6-year-old company. So to a lot of that, simple words is consumers are changing. They're looking for new brands. They're looking for new type of purchasing relativity to their own lives.
Right.
And second is, I think the one major importance is China is rising, right? And it's actually quite interesting. One of my investors, is Cathay. And French brands are always the target of international PE funds and VC funds. And many of the, I think the past stereotype has been saying the French brand founders and British brand founders extremely picky, particularly high end. They're relatively speaking reluctant to taking Chinese investors. We are not only becoming shareholders of these brands, we are now majority shareholders for the past 3 years during pandemic. So you can see that's a definitely significant change of the China funding status from their point of view.
Yeah, so basically you mentioned a very important point, which is the consumer and consumer behavior. These are the things that supports the fundamental growth of all those new businesses in China. So Wu Chun, you're in BCG, you do a lot of consultings for all those companies and you see a lot of industries. So what do you see are the biggest changes in the consumer sector in China during past 3 years? And how do you think they're marching towards accepting all those new things, autonomous driving, like brands, from your perspective, how do you understand this?
Well, I'm very glad that Yushopal has actually paved the way and for my answers to this question. Over the 3 years of COVID, we have actually discussed a lot about the topic of recovery and resilience, and also quality growth with our clients domestically and globally. And as you said, and the resilience is not only sought on over economy and the supply chain for key industries as a result, but also on general consumer confidence, willingness to spend, and buying behavior as a starting point. BCG interviewed 9,000 consumers at the end of 2022 and the beginning of 2023.
Right.
And across age groups and income levels and covering tier 1 to tier 5 cities. And we asked them about their demand preference for 45 categories of goods and services, including food, clothing, housing, auto, and consumer electronics, so on and so forth. Two major findings, and to echo what speakers on so far have said. Number one, China expects to add 73 million middle-class consumers by 2030,
Right.
and with 70% coming from lower tier cities. They're not only coming from Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, but also from tier 3 cities and below. The second point, China's consumers across age groups, and we're talking about 4 age groups, and across many categories, show strong willingness to trade up, even after the COVID. Some are for better quality, some are for bigger brands, and some are for personal preferences. So we believe these are fundamental, not only for domestic companies, but also for global companies, how to capture this growing economy, growing willingness to spend, and the consumer trends. It's really coming from consumer, not only from channel.
Right, right. Those are very helpful. So Tony, I think Guo Lu during her expression just now, she also mentioned during past 3 years was a difficult time for everyone, every enterprises. You guys, how did you survive during past 3 years during the most difficult times? Does government give you enough support? And looking back, what do you think we could have done better? And going forward, what are the substantial or another additional policy supports that you think government should support in your view?
Yeah, over the past 3 years, it has been a very difficult time. I think not only for WeRide as a startup, but to all enterprises, to all business owners, small business owners especially. That's a very, very tough time. And how to survive? There are several things you can do. First of all, you have to be very careful about your budget, right? You must conserve your cash flow. Second, you need to, even during the lockdown period, whatever very, very difficult circumstances, you have to find a way to at least earn some money. Okay. The local government has done a lot. I truly appreciate. First of all, we get some rent deduction, and we get some support for getting us some apartment for our talent engineers. The government also help us to do certain, help us to achieve certain collaboration with other state-owned enterprise. Try their best to find scenarios, landing scenarios, and potential collaborators for us.
Right.
So I think they have done a lot. And one thing I want to point out is like the local government officials. They are a group of people, extremely hardworking people. Okay, 8 hours to them is nothing. I think many of them may work like more than 16 hours a day. I work with them. I know how hard they work. And but what we have learned, my personal view, I still think market is the best place to allocate all kinds of resources. China should remain open, and we should make sure our supply chain is stable, and we should try our best under this current certain geopolitical environment. We still need to be very confident, hold on the position that China will be open up to the world. Other things like during the pandemic, using more scientific view or scientific method will help us to fight against the maybe it's a global it's globalization is kind of the trend, and if there's another pandemic coming, we need to be prepared. Put more resources in vaccine development, put more resource in research against the virus and pandemic. That's what there are lots of things we have learned, and besides, I think still we need to keep being optimistic look, humankind with our civilization, we have been here for more than 5,000 years with certain history, and so we conquer many difficulties together. So therefore, we should be optimistic. I think that's my personal view.
Right. So conserve your cash, making sure to have enough cash flow, and also remain very optimistic. Working closely with the central government and also local government are key to survive in difficult times. So Director Zhang, you are from Ministry of Commerce. So what do you think after pandemic are the biggest regional conflicts of regional economic development problems in China? And do you think government has done enough?
This is a very complicated issue. Actually, you know that in China, this is a large country, and regional imbalance development situation is existing for a long time. In the past, we are majorly discussing China's eastern part of China, central part of China, and the western part of China, as well as northeast part of China, the different development level, development efficiency. But in recent 5 years, another very obvious situation is that in China, north part of China and the south part of China, between them, development level and their economic scale proportion in China becomes quite different. For example, if you look at the north part of China, actually 10 years ago, their proportion may be estimated about 45%. Nowadays, only 35%. But for south part of China, nowadays, their proportion from estimated about 55%. Nowadays, actually already above 65%, even higher. So behind this type of situation, that's mainly major reasons, including business environmental improvement and capital concentration and industrial concentration, as well as human resources concentration, something like that. So in the past 3 years, also we can find that in China, different regions have different economic performance and different economic driving force. Generally speaking, I think that for both central government and local government, they already have their medium and long-term, regional development planning. Consider how to make regional development becomes more balanced. Meanwhile, for my experiences, actually, in some of northern part of China provinces, they already started to consider how to change their economic driving model. For example, in the past, maybe they are mainly focusing on those heavy industry sectors. But nowadays, we are encourage those provinces to promote innovation-oriented economic model, especially those new sectors, new business models, and new economic driving force. Of course, we think that regional imbalance issues it's not easy to be changed. So based on China's monetary policy support and our fiscal policy support, as well as regional policy support, including our social policy supporting. So I think that in the near future, gradually, we can make our regional development becomes more and more balanced.
Right. So as long as the gap is not going to be further exacerbated, this is good news. We do need regional economic development balance. So Julian Ling, you are on the industrial internet sector. So what did you see during past 3 years? And how do you think the recovery is going on from your perspective?
The international and the domestic political and economic environment is complex and even change. And business face the challenge such as the rising production cost and the lack of innovative development momentum. and the intensive domestic and the foreign market competition as well. So I think that these issues are especially in the small and the medium-sized enterprise. So the digital transformation has become mandatory for the small, medium enterprise to break free from these problems and achieve high-quality development. So in our practice at Cosmo Play, we focus on industrial data collection, storage, and analysis. And for the first time, we have involved users in the entire process to achieve the zero distance between the enterprise, users, and the resources. So this will help traditional industry and the new technology to quickly integrate and accelerate the transformation of the traditional industry into digitalization. I will give you an example. Like in Jingdezhen, in Jiangxi, we have created the China ceramic industrial internet platform to help Jingdezhen accelerate the captivity of the new technology and the new business model. The new pattern in the ceramic industry and help small and medium-sized enterprise on the platform to achieve the fresh production. In the first week after the Chinese New Year holiday, the Yishan ceramic company on the platform received a new e-commerce order worth around 1 million. Since the entire platform was established, it has been favored by ceramic enterprise from all major ceramic production area across the whole country. And more than 3,000 upstream and downstream company in the industry chain have actively joined the platform.
Right.
And help this enterprise achieve a rapid increase in order volume. I think that's our practice in Jingdezhen.
Right. That's a very vivid example. Thank you so much. So while every industry is trying to be weaponized by digitalization, we do have a lot of things going on during the road of economic recovery. So Tony, let me follow up on this. If this autonomous driving can really replace the driving as what we are seeing now, like human driving as we're seeing now, if one day that you replace Didi, for instance, what this world will look like? Can you help us to imagine?
Okay. So actually, I want to be a little bit more detailed about. We are not replacing Didi. We are replacing some human drivers with robotic drivers.
Right.
As you mentioned before, like we are getting into an aging society, and so we want to use as much as possible robotic manpower to replace human power. So that has actually happened in history. Look, over the past maybe 100 years, we don't have the telephone operators. We have a programmable auto operator, that is programmable switching machines. We actually have lots of vocations that actually disappeared. We invented a washing machine. There's no washer as a vocation.
Right.
And we now in future, like we would need many taxi drivers. But if you look at our birth rate, especially in East Asia, our society getting aging. We can't find enough young manpower to do this kind of taxi driver and to do the street sweeper. Therefore, if we make everything robotic, we can save the precious manpower to do something that is more creative, that is more relaxing job. And these days, with the invention of ChatGPT, people are always thinking about what are we doing? What are human beings good at? I always say human beings are good at doing creative things, doing things with creativity. For some tedious work that with simple repeating task, that's for machine to do. If you look at driving as a task, It's basically watching the environment. You may either make a left turn or make a right turn. You either accelerate or you either decelerate to a full stop. That's, in terms of task, it's relatively easy. It's so suitable for machine or artificial intelligence to do. Besides, human tend to make mistakes when they are angry, when they are emotional, when they get drunk, when they are not concentrated. However, machine never made mistake if they get enough electricity. Therefore, we believe with autonomous driving, we can make the future transportation happier, safer, more efficient, and more controllable. I don't want everybody to get stuck in the road every 2 hours. You live in Beijing, you know how many hours we spend on road.
Right.
And I want to save this time for everybody. That's my view of the future of autonomous driving.
Right. So basically, you're liberating people from all those hard work, repetitive work, and try to generate more sort of labor force through technology. So why you are better than your peers? I understand that you're probably the only company in both United States and China having this license, and you're definitely in the tier 1 in terms of autonomous driving sector. So what makes you better than your peers? This is my first question. And second question to you is, how far and what is the gap between L4 and L5? Is L5 even realistic?
Okay, two very good questions. First of all, the answer to the first question, I want to remain with a humble answer. That is, I will never say that I'm better than my peers. Also, it's dynamic. Today, if you feel you are number 1, maybe tomorrow you will be number 3. So always stay humble, always stay hungry. That's our motto. And if you think why we are in current advantageous position, I think there are several things we are proud of. That is our culture. I always mention our We Ride culture, or we have a culture called GREAT, which is an acronym. G stands for grow together. We grow together with our employees. R stands for results driven. We look at the good results. I stands for innovation. We try our best to make innovative things.
Right.
T stands for teamwork. We working together, put them together. It's great. You have to hold on to your objective. That is our culture. That is our core value. At the same time, we save the budget. We try to make our products to generate real value for our customers. We hold a view of a long time. We hold a view of trying to not to make judgment or make some quick movement according to short-term value. We want to hold long-term value. That's probably some advantages of our company. Okay.
Right.
What's your second question? Sorry, when I talk too much, my memory is kind of limited. I forgot your second question.
Right. No, GRIT is definitely a very interesting sort of acronym. And then thanks a lot for giving us this fundamental cultural value of your company and why you're better. My next question is about L4 and L5. Is L5 even realistic in this stage of our life?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I can tell you L5 is not realistic.
Right, okay.
I can mark my words. There are people talk about even with this current mania of ChatGPT, right? People talk about AGI, and you can see there are lots of debates on the internet, especially from the scientists in artificial intelligence field. I have been doing this kind of research for more than 20 years. I'm very confident that I haven't seen that any possible solution to general artificial intelligence. ChatGPT is using a very good large language model to patch all the information together. But still, my personal view, I don't think this is a promising solution to general artificial intelligence. Therefore, I don't think I'm really pessimistic in this part, that whether I can see L5 in my lifetime, but L4 is definitely achievable in the near future. That's my view.
Right, cool. Thanks for the insight. I think you mentioned a very interesting point that our human life and our human behavior are indeed evolving from washing machine to, liberate our driving force, so to speak. A lot of things are evolving. So Guolu, my question to you is, you've been in this branding industry for a very long time and an expert in consumer behavior. Now when you evaluate a brand and when you see the longevity of a brand, what do you see the biggest changes? Previously, maybe we have 100-year brand. What is it looking like now? Do we still have that kind of time frame for a brand?
Actually, We do. If you look at, but however, you will see also extensive shortening of lifespan of brands that's not really hitting consumer, who just what we call ibolio, which is one-way brands that's going to disappear very fast. That's because the Chinese consumer and also the global consumer, to a certain point of view, are actually gaining brand relevancy and trying brands at much faster stage versus before. But if where China is today, if you're looking back, where the consumer are going from a channel-heavy perspective into a much more brand-heavy perspective, and as market grow, of a market similar to us, actually going through the same phase, are Japan and United States, right? And these markets also had consumer that has been changing for the past 5 years, for continuously decades. But however, they still emerged real longevity brands, particularly on the high end. There is a stronger barrier to that. And to your question related to how we choose brand, one of the key criteria is that you do not have to be the largest in terms of volume, but you do have to be a brand where you have preferably actually longer than 13 years, which you pass the 2 7-year cycle. And that usually means you actually, from who the brand really is, the consumer really are loving you, and also from how do you develop product and communication, everything is much more in line with the identity. Now, I find this tremendously difficult concept to educate in China. Actually, I'm very fortunate. I work with VF and also J&J. Both are company that's literally almost hundreds of years, literally 100-year-old conglomerates managing brands through different life cycle. I have to say that one of the shifts China will have to face is, as the international economic power growing, you always see brand groups emerging out of this kind of market and actually going to become a global stage. But as that happens, you have to have longevity-driven brands, and particularly at higher end, because the R&D requirements and also the brand building capacity and power at a global acceptance level in terms of aesthetics, in terms of even consumer communication, much have to be stronger. And we are going through that phase, but there's definitely a talent shortage in China. It's one of the hardest things we have to face is actually even during COVID, is how do you train the next generation Chinese brand builder that can be building and bring in global, literally powerful brands, but in China zero, into a powerful brands into China, but also bringing Chinese brand builders connect to the global stage, making sure their next phase can go into the global competitive landscape also. And that, I think, is what Yu Xiaohao is doing. I've been connecting the founders with Julia Zagan with Chinese perfume founders, right? And several of that kind of things, building the bridge. But even training for us, which is continuously past 6 years, we built more than 10 very new brands into China, but prominent over almost 25-year-old brands globally into a somewhat small mega brands. But then you can still see training new talents into able to do this take us almost literally 18 months to 24 months before they can actually begin to be a brand mindset. I think that is where China's next power stage will have to develop further.
Right. Fair enough. Brand building is an art, and you need customer loyalty as well. So these are actually very tricky things, but glad you guys did very well. So Wu Chun, from your perspective, how do you see this consumer retail sector recovery as a general driving force and its importance to the post-COVID economic recovery in China? And where do you think we are now? Are we, have we done 30%, 50%, or we're 70% already in terms of the recovery in the sector?
Well, it's very difficult to pinpoint what percentage we're on the recovery for consumer sectors. But I can tell you this, that is, all the sectors, really driving from a pre-COVID situation to a post-COVID context are making changes to adapt to new environment. And because after 3 years, we're not going back to a pre-COVID environment, but going into a post-COVID, new geopolitical, economic, and environmental context. So some of the historical growth drivers are changed. For that, going back to what your questions on the consumer sectors as well as industries on the recovery speed, I believe it's a combination of recovery and sustainable growth post-recovery. So for that, people are facing new growth drivers, and business are like new challenges and new opportunities.
Right. So my final question is also a very important question. Is to Director Zhang. What do you think that the government can do better to better stimulate the economic recovery in China? This year is actually very critical.
Of course. Recently, maybe all of you noticed that not only IMF, but also World Bank, United Nations, actually their prediction for China's economic growth has been, upgraded. For example, for IMF in last year, in November, I remember their prediction was 4.4% growth rate. At that time, my comments was that that prediction was too conservative. So this year, their adjustment actually follows the major prediction made by international financial institutions and China's domestic institutions. I think maybe this year China's growth rate may be between 5% to 6%, something like that. You know that actually domestic consumption nowadays in the last 10 years already becomes the major economic driving force for China's economy. Its proportion estimated about 60% to 80%. So just before all of you talking about China's huge market, new brand, chasing by Chinese consumers. So I think that this year, how to promote China's consumption recovery, by coupons, by consumption policies, by financing, supporting, fiscal supporting, something like that. So this is a very important direction. The second direction that was, investment. That the government will provide a policy, positive fiscal policy to provide, additional money to support infrastructure and, those investments in real estate sectors and, manufacturing sectors. Of course, China is the biggest, exporter in the world. So nowadays, we can see that China's international competitiveness is still quite strong. So I think that, even if this year international market demand shrinking, however, I think that China's international trade still will make their contribution to China's economic recovery and China's job opportunities.
Great, thanks. I think that's a really comprehensive summary of the policies we need. Entrepreneurs are the source of innovation and the driver of economic growth of Chinese economy. So thank you very much again for our guests today to participate in our panel. And I also want to convey the special thanks to APEC China Business Council for their support to today's program. My name is Kate Kui from CGTN. Until next time, bye for now.